Prism. I am currently based in Singapore, and I've been here in Singapore since December 2020. Prior to me jumping onto the Singapore bandwagon, I was located down under in Melbourne for the past few years, and predominantly working with one of the partners, Deloitte. And my specialty kind of was starting and scaling automation programs, focusing specifically on financial services and the public sector. And yeah, kind of the perspective I hope to bring today is kind of more of the technical lens on some of the questions today.
Good. Well, we're definitely going to give you some tough questions to think about. Good. Next up is Andrew.
Hi, Jan. Thanks for having me. G'day to everyone. I'm the Vice President at Automation Anywhere. I lead our business across Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand. I do live down under, so I live in Melbourne, spend a lot of time up in region. In fact, I was last up in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur only a week and a half ago. It's really exciting times in the industry, AI and automation. So I couldn't think of a better place for all of us to be, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion today.
Absolutely. So we're definitely going to talk about those two hot topics, which is the whole reason we picked the panel's name for today, which is automation and AI, allies and adversaries. And I'm quite sure everyone will have something to share around that. But before we go into the details, let me introduce my last and final guest, Keng To, better known as KT. Would you please do me the favor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invite to this panel discussion. My name is Keng To. I'm actually the head of automation platforms in BAT. We've been doing automation, or at least setting up the whole COE, about roughly 4 to 5 years ago. So we are one of the early ones, I guess, to do that, especially off from KL as well. That's where I'm from as of right now. So yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that makes you one of the very early adopters, because when I started with automation best practices in around 2018, then there were no, I would say, operational centers of excellence really located in the region yet, which we could find in any level of maturity at that stage. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining our panel discussion. If it's okay, I'm going to dive right in. But before I do that, just like the panel discussion that we had yesterday, I'm going to encourage the audience to ask questions, which I will try to weave in our discussion today. So if you have any questions for any of the members directly, or any generic statement that you would like to see answered, please use the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. So I'm going to start with the main statement for today, and maybe let's start with Andrew today. Automation and AI, are they allies or adversaries, and why?
Well, Jan, I think there's only one answer to the question, isn't there? But maybe on the panel we'll all have different answers. I think they're very much its allies. For me, AI is fantastic for data extraction, for summarization, for creating content. But I think where it gets interesting is automation turns it into activity. And when we look at our own business, just in the last quarter that we've finished, we had a record quarter, but 30% of the solutions that we sold were based on Gen AI enabled solutions. And that area of our go-to-market is growing significantly. In fact, more than 50% of our customers globally now, they've downloaded our AI packages already, and they're well and truly on the road to embracing Gen AI use cases with automation. So I'm very much on the allies side of the fence.
Good. Well, that's very good to hear. Let's go to KT. Do you share that opinion?
Yeah, I do share Andrew's opinion quite a fair bit, to be really honest, because with this journey for a while, and we really do see a lot of benefit in terms of things like productivity and creativeness and stuff like that comes out of it. But I think there's also another side of things where, it's not really an adversary. It's more of like, we just need to find a right way to control it. There is this whole talk about, the AI ethics and stuff like that. I think it's just, really having the correct governance, the correct framework to, guide this thing a little bit more. The next thing you want to do, for example, you're going to release a Skynet to the world or something like that. But it's truly a good tool. We've been benefiting it a lot from our organization's perspective. We've been reaping a lot of benefits out of it. We kind of moved into a multi-category as an organization, and automation did help us to push ourselves a little bit more further, because now we have to do a lot more things, but with the same resourcing that is coming in. So I love the tool personally, but I just think that there's this little box that we just need to be a little bit more careful of. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I fully agree on that. And I think that that's definitely a topic that we're going to touch upon in way more detail in this panel. But before I do that, let me also move to Mahmoud. Allies or adversaries?
Yeah, look, I think, as Andrew mentioned, there's a very clear-cut answer here, right? But Katie mentioned a very interesting point here, which is around they're not necessarily adversaries, but I think our understanding of both sometimes might confuse the two, which kind of can lead to us kind of leaning one side or thinking one can do the other. But I think in essence, they're both two sides of the same coin. One is the brain, one is the muscle, right? They both have their own kind of advantages and disadvantages and limitations. But yeah, I think any organizations now would need both of them to kind of to move forward.
Very, very good. However, just also because two of you are working for, I would say, the leading automation providers or tool sets that exist in the world today. One of the comments that I had earlier in the conference was, yes, we are all embracing AI. Only the risk or the threat for us as RPA providers is a little bit that people start more searching for an artificial intelligence solution instead of looking for an automation platform. So it shifts a bit of the focus towards looking for AI tools instead of automation tools. How do you deal with that, or how would you respond to that comment, and how would you deal with that from a positioning point of view? So let's start with Mahmoud to continue your views on that.
Yeah, so again, that's a very interesting topic because it doesn't just come out now, right? It comes out almost with every new technology. Like, for example, generative AI. When it first started, we got companies say we want to use generative AI. And it's kind of the approach that they're focusing more on the tool that they want to use rather than the problem that they want to resolve, right? And so, for example, I think I'll just briefly mention an example. One of the customers asked us, I want to use Gen AI to generate kind of our code or our automation code. And we're like, well, you can do that. We have a tool that does that. It's not a Gen AI tool, but it definitely addresses the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So I think when clients and customers come to us and say, we want to use artificial intelligence, I think we try to move the shift rather than the tool to the problem that they're trying to solve, right? And it might be that, yes, artificial or AI is the way to go forward, but sometimes it's not. It's just that we can definitely do it with automation. So clarifying the problem first before the tool, I think, is an important step in this conversation.
Would that mean, and maybe that's a good question for Andrew, that you're starting to position more as an AI platform instead of an automation platform, or is that too soon to say?
We are positioning it as the same thing. So I agree with Mahmoud, but we're going to market very much not around RPA, but around intelligent automation. And we see AI as a part of that portfolio. So we're an AI-enabled portfolio, and we're open for all large language models. We get challenged with the question all the time, and there's great use cases for Gen AI as an example alone. But to Mahmoud's point, it's very much about the problem statement that you're solving, and most often the right solution is a combined solution. And I'll give you an example. One of the best examples in the industry at the moment is what's happening with document automation. Because what's happened overnight with generative AI, it's given us really good capability for data extraction and summarization. When you combine that with the power of document automation, you now have the ability not only to drive really great success rates for structured documents, but across semi-structured and unstructured. And we've got loads of examples, but we're seeing it's more about the problem statement than about the technology.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, that the best solution is a combined solution. I can, however, imagine that in larger enterprises, you typically have different teams specifying around different technologies. So let's say at a large organization like BAT, there's probably a data science team and there is an automation team. So how do you weave those together? And you can guess who my next question is for. Kuti, what's your take on that?
You're quite spot on. I think a lot of organizations starting to pillarize their so-called capabilities. So we have automations, we have AI, but as we matured through our, the years that we are doing things and stuff like that, it comes to a point where these lines needs to be really blurred out to a certain extent. So even in my case perspective, running the automation platforms as of right now, but we do see that there is this need to talk to the AI guys. There's this need to talk to the data analytics and stuff like that, and that's why part of as an organization we decided, hey, let's put everything under one one leadership and let that leadership run it. And that's what is happening to right now. I mean, we may not have all the frameworks, the governance that has put into place to make sure this is well governed and well put into place. But what we do is we'll try our little steps. We take little steps, for example, collaboration of the team first, start working on use cases together. As long as we are driving the right business value to the business team themselves, that they are going to use it, they become the evangelists, and things will get much more easier. We just need some proven use cases that teams can work together, whether it's within the same leadership or cross pillars and stuff like that, and you just push out. And that's part of my new portfolio as well. It's just to bring
I think that this is a convergence that we're seeing in almost every organization. It doesn't always go without some struggles, but that's I would say part of change and change management.
Yeah.
You're mentioning something very, very interesting, and that is the governance side of things. Just before we had this panel discussion, we had a presentation from chief architects from Microsoft, and they know a thing or two around large language models as well. And he showed during his presentation kind of like a guideline around AI ethics. And basically what he explained is, well, we've now set up a governance body, and every new automation workflow or a model that is using an AI solution is now first vetted against a number of the principles that are in that specific guideline. And I thought that would be a very interesting topic to also introduce in our panel today, because you're specifically also mentioning that governance approach. Would that be something that you think is going to be the future and is something that every organization should move towards? Let's continue with KT for a second, and then we're going to go towards the vendor perspective.
Sure. I think for any organization, we just need to make sure that we are using the right tools in the right way. AI is a very broad term kind of thing. So you need to be able to streamline the people, and also sometimes weed out all the ridiculous requests to a certain extent, and get people on the right road. So for us, or any organization per se that is using all these technologies and stuff like that, first thing we need to really safeguard is what is ours, which is things like intellectual properties, your financial numbers and whatever kind of things. So within that, that's when you need to start building your governance, your framework behind it, so that we protect it a little bit more before you go on the wild ride, like unleashing, for example, ChatGPT in the whole organization kind of model. That for me, governance has always been one of the many first few steps that we put in. I know it's nice to create little POCs and wow the world behind it. But when people start asking for it and you don't have a governance behind it, the question is, do you do delivery, or do you want to safeguard what is going to happen? So yeah, our stand from an organizational perspective is always make sure that part of whatever that you're building, that there's a little bit of a governance inside there. It may not be 200 steps to get things happen, but
Mahmoud, you are involved in selling and making sure that customers know about these solutions. So this must be a question that you get 1 million times a week. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting one, right? Because I think similar that to other softwares, not saying automation, right? There's what the software does, and there's the governance around how you use the software. It's like similar to databases, similar to everything else. You can use them to do very good things, but also if left unchecked, they can cause some harm, right? And so I think one of the things that we work a lot with customers, especially in the initial stages, is before we talk to them after we've established the business case, is like, look, governance is going to be a huge part of this process. We want to make sure that you understand that this is not something that's going to just kind of go on its own, right? And set the expectation that some time is needed to kind of spend on the governance. And this is to ensure the sustainability of the product, right? It's not going to hurt you in the first 1 to 5 processes if you don't have governance. But the moment you start expanding or moving into areas where they're a bit more sensitive, like financial statements or recruiting or things that have a bit more of a human interaction, that's when kind of the value of proper governance kind of comes into play.
And do you use a specific framework or guidelines that exist, or a specific best practice that you could recommend?
So it's interesting you mentioned that. So we have something called kind of robotic operating model, right? Okay. And the aim of that is kind of to talk about the governance around the strategy, the governance around the people, the technology, how do you do process discovery, how you develop the processes, and then how you kind of maintain them in production, right? We recently kind of revamped that because we've gotten a lot of, like, as the panel mentioned, there's a lot of AI technologies that are coming in, right? So I think the robotic operating model needed to kind of be advanced. So we recently launched the ROM 2. But yeah, we do have a quite comprehensive piece around governance. And it's not going to lie, it takes a lot more time to talk about governance than it does about the technical solution.
Absolutely, I can imagine that. Andrew, what's your perspective on this discussion?
Yeah, Jan, security and governance, absolutely a really critical topic. Comes up in every customer engagement, and we encourage our customers, even before going down the path of a proof of concept, to undertake an InfoSec review and establish good security and governance. So kind of very focused on that. We're advising that you've got to look at everything from access controls to how do you look at code analysis, what do you do with data privacy, and the regulatory environment changes country by country. Even across the Asian countries, if you just take banking, financial services, and insurance as an example, the regulatory environment looks completely different between Singapore and Malaysia. I think it's important to establish good monitoring. You've got to consider data sovereignty, and data sovereignty is an important topic in Asia because not all cloud instances are housed in the countries that we're doing business with. I mean, the customers that you're doing business with. And then there's a consideration also around security and governance where we're deeply in discussions on, which is the large language models themselves. Do you leverage Google or AWS or Microsoft, or do you build your own in-house? And for large enterprise, we're seeing and hearing more of the later as the direction that customers are headed.
Yeah. So it's funny that you're bringing up the regulatory aspect, because that was absolutely spot on the next main topic that I wanted to discuss with all of you.
So sorry to steal your thunder.
No, that's the whole fun of doing this live. In the US, there has been a working group that is now busy on writing guidelines for ethical AI. In Europe, they're even further, and they are considering putting in legislation so that tools or solutions still need to be vetted for the use of ethical AI. And you see in different parts of around Southeast Asia also, I would say, more earlier stage initiatives around vetting these kinds of algorithms. Let me start with a more of a kind of a philosophical question first. Is this something that a government should try to regulate? Or do you think, there's just, nice try, but absolutely no chance that you're going to be successful because, it's a global world? Let's start with KT. What's your perspective?
Interestingly, we have this conversation about data sovereignty, and we went into certain country in Asia. You are right, spot on. Like Korea, for example, they wanted to do their data sovereignty and all. That creates a problem, but I think it's not wrong to have that. But it's from a government perspective, it's how you build the legislation. I may not be an expert here, but I think there is a point that you can put people on the edge, and there's one point that you push people literally off the edge, because you can see across the world, different people has like different policies that really try to put them in a little island by itself. And now we are talking about globalization and stuff like that. This is not going to help. The question is, where do we find the right balance in this? It's a difficult topic. I think to a certain extent we have to lean on some legislation here and there to get things right. It's not that we want to do anything wrong or whatsoever. It's more of what is the best for the organization is what is also the best for operating in each individual market itself. It's a very difficult balance, and I think this one, a lot of organizations like us would get challenged by it to a certain extent. Have we cracked the nut on this? I probably say we probably don't have. Maybe and Andrew and Mohammed, they probably have a better perspective from a technology, how to make this happen, because it's a struggling topic for us as well, and it will never disappear because one country starts something, someone would want to follow. It becomes a regional issue. It becomes like a
absolutely,
little bit more
and that is bringing, I think, a lot of questions that haven't been answered yet. I'd like to move to Andrew for a second around that, and talking about the regulatory aspect. There are some people who are saying, this should be regulated from a more national government approach. There's also others who are saying, since it's fragmented across the world, try to get two governments to agree on anything is already a very serious challenge. So the responsibility of using these tools in a sustainable and ethical way should be with the big tech vendors. So I'm gonna put AA for a second in the big tech vendors domain. What would be, is there a responsibility for the corporations in that part, or is it to say, we develop the technology and ultimately what people do with it, that's not something that we can control?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. The reality is we live in a global market, but at a country level, the countries we're seeing, and it's early days, but it'll be at a government level that puts in place the guidelines. Just as an example, and I know it's not Asia, but I live in Australia. The Australian government has already issued a paper, it's 180 pages long, on what their early thoughts are around ethical AI. And guess who they've asked for feedback from? All of the major industry providers. So they've asked for solicitation and feedback back from the large technology providers, and they, via the Australian Information Industry Association, they want to work side by side with the vendors to then come up with the right framework for the government to adopt. And I think every country is going to have its own role to play at a government level, but then if they can leverage that globally and work, across global boundaries, I think that's going to be best for all, but that's going to take a lot of time.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes I wonder with myself if that's the time that we actually have, or whether either companies or governments have the ability to catch up with that. The interesting thing that we see happening within the AI domain, not just within automation, but the companies who develop this, is that you do have a number of big players that saying by themselves, this might be something dangerous, or we need to pause this, or we might need to hit the brake. During the weekend, I'm quite sure all of you followed this. There was this big fight within one of the larger OpenAI companies around what is the ethics. Ultimately, that's the question behind the issue around these kind of technologies. And it made me think a little bit around the days in which people worked on technology just before wars and things like that. That were people working in those solutions that thought, well, is this something that we should want as mankind, and should we not take this a little bit slower because it might lead to serious implications? The reason I'm kind of building up to this is because I've seen a first question coming in from one of our attendees, and I'd like to kind of put that on the screen for everyone real quick. And that question says, well, can you elaborate on the potential vulnerabilities that AI adversaries can exploit in entire automation systems? And what would those vulnerabilities be, I think, is the question behind that. And I'm also obviously interested in learning around what would be the solution to that. Maybe let's start with Mahmoud.
Yeah, sure, of course. I think main vulnerabilities around automation, or something that kind of really needs to take some time to consider, is when you automate something that's going to run potentially forever in the organization, right? If there is a mistake that no one caught in that process, or if someone has put in some malicious code within that to do something, and the governance and structures were not there, that will run for a potentially long time before something happens, before this is discovered, right? So governance around, I guess, what the digital workers do, and governance around just regular maintenance or regular checks around what is happening with the digital worker, that's probably one of the main ones, especially when it comes to financial services and public sector. They're very peculiar about what goes into their production environment. So that's a very real risk that I think most organizations we deal with have kind of quite a lot of guidelines around addressing. Another one potentially is kind of overloading certain applications or overloading certain systems. As mentioned, it kind of stems from the same origin, that this runs forever, right? And if so, for example, a password that you're using a password to log into the system has changed the password and you're still using the old one in the automation, that's going to lock your account, right? Yeah. That's going to be like 5,000 tries. You're probably going to lock into the account, and that process won't work for until someone finds out that this is, this account is locked, right? So I guess it mostly stems from just kind of realizing or having the understanding that this has a massive potential. Even the smallest faults, just due to the scale, can amplify across the organization, and just making sure that proper testing and proper guidelines is implemented. I think that's one of the main ones that we kind of, or that I see on the day-to-day when talking to the organizations.
Absolutely. And I think that those vulnerabilities are not necessarily something new, but the skill with which we can execute that has become, I would say, unprecedented. Let's move towards a use case around that, and let me go to Keng To for this specifically. Technically speaking, I can program bots myself very, very easily, and I could, if I have access to a database, I could very easily say set up an, let's say, automated email to, let's say that I have a customer database and I send an email to all of the customers saying from an official email address that we're going to stop doing business with them. Do you have safeguards? So I'm still building a little bit on the vulnerabilities part and also some of the things that Mahmoud introduced. Do you already have safeguards in place to ensure that that could not happen? or is this still a really real threat that you might face?
Okay, in BAT, we started something called a Citizen Developer Program, which enables people to build their own automation, whether with AI capability or a straight-off automation kind of things. And with that, the first thing that came to our mind is, what if someone is using it for no good? And what we did as a COE perspective, we actually started to do approved patterns. So any or maybe you want to call it connectors and actions that you want to allow and stuff like that. So what we did was we actually came out with a guideline on how to use all these the approved connectors, and anything that is not approved, you need to go through what our enterprise architects to get it reviewed and stuff like that, to assess with the cybersecurity team and stuff like that. And most importantly is with the legal team. I think to a certain extent, especially with data that is concerning, like for example GDPRs and stuff like that, and every single country has their own standard. We just need to make sure that the right governance is put into place. That said, this is also to safeguard what is for our organization or any organization to a certain extent. But what we do one step further was we actually do manual controls as well. So let's say if you are running a so-called finance process that eventually will send out to all the customer database and stuff like that, there is a compensating controls that we will ask, for example, a person to be the one that is approving everything that is going out. Of course, we'll make their life a little bit easier. We get them a little bit of summary and stuff like that. And then there's a small little button at the bottom that clicks, okay, we are good to go. So it's just a little bit of additional checks that we put into place, just to make sure that nothing is just gone malicious, or nothing has just gone beyond what it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, I think that's already 2 steps further than what I've heard in a lot of other organizations. I think you're quite ahead there.
Yeah, Jan, can I jump on that quickly? I'm so glad KT brought up citizen development, because citizen development is a tremendous way to scale. We really encourage our customers to explore citizen development programs, but there's vulnerabilities associated with it. And I think having a really tight security and governance framework as you build out that citizen development program is really important, because you've got different categories of citizen developers. It's probably less an issue for the consumers, but those that are creators or champions of citizen development, I think you need to make sure that you've got tight guardrails in place.
Yeah, good. I'm going to ask one more question that kind of builds a little bit around this, and this is also going to be for you, Andrew, and that's about the role of the vendors play in that specific ecosystem. So technically speaking, I could go to AA's website, I could buy a license, and I would start intentionally, let's say I'm just an individual one person, and I could start intentionally using the technology that you created or your company created in order to, let's say, send out fake messages or deliberately send scam emails or things like that. Is there a moment, because obviously, first of all, it's difficult for you to check that because it's on a customer, it's running at a specific customer. But is there a specific moment where companies such as AA or Blue Prism or any other big vendor should say, well, we are going to cease a business because we see that these automation and AI technologies are not used for proper intentions, and therefore we are proactively cutting ties? Is that something that should be considered, or is that considered?
Well, I think we're all ethical.
Yeah.
And, if we were to find out about that, I guess we've got a role to play in reporting that via our own governance and security guidelines internally.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not aware of it in region, but I love the example you bring up. I find it's really important, and we build a program around it. We call it Pathfinder, but we work with our customers really closely, all of our larger enterprise customers, kind of on 5 key focus areas, and it basically puts in place the right guidelines. So the first bit is we focus on the program itself, and programs are going to differ industry by industry, and some are going to be centralized, others federated. You got a citizen development model that KT mentioned, but we focus on the program. We're focused on the people, and that's a really important piece as you scale out your AI and automation program. Importantly, you've got to look at pipeline and how do you drive the future of your pipeline? Do you crowdsource it? Do you go through process discovery, either with cloud-based tools or with consultancy engagements? Or do you maybe leverage Gen AI to discover the future of your pipeline? And so we encourage a strong focus on pipeline ideation. The fourth thing is around the production environment, and that's where security and governance is so important. And then when you wrap it all together with a really good promotion and engagement environment, so you're almost selling your own success stories across the organization, then that fuels the growth. That's kind of the framework that we always engage our customers on.
Good. That's a very good answer to a very difficult question.
Yeah, curly question.
Good. I've talked, I would say, enough around the dark or the difficult side around AI. I would like to shift focus now towards the amazing, cool, innovative features that AI brings to the table. Because yes, I think everyone is now aware of the risk, but there's also so much potential. And the reason I want to switch to this is I also saw a question coming up. So maybe Mahmoud, the next one is for you. How does AI in enterprise automation contribute to more sustainable, environmental friendly business models? Are there any notable success stories in this regard? So how can we use, let's say, AI for good?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question and kind of very common now, especially with ESG kind of initiatives coming around. So I'll kind of mention this kind of within the Singapore lens, right? Within the Singapore, one, we're seeing a lot more clients asking about, look, we want to do something with automation in ESG. Can it help us, right? Can we do this for good? And there's a number of good use cases where it's around, look, automating certain reports, calculating your carbon footprint, because normally these kind of initiatives, you need to take data from multiple systems and kind of collate them into a report and then send them to the different regulatory bodies, right? It's a very daunting task, but it's something that kind of, I guess, automation and AI are particularly well-versed to complete, right? So I think within the ESG realm, there's a lot of potential there depending on the use case. I think one of the challenges, though, around using this for this particular good case is that because it's a new area, the processes themselves around ESG reporting within organizations are not always clear, right? When we ask our organizations, okay, how do you generate this report? We're like, oh, well, sometimes we look at this and sometimes we look at this website. And so the processes themselves are not structured, right? And I think maybe that's one of the advantages that I assume anyone who's dealt with automation kind of deals with. When you want to automate any process, it's like kind of shining a mirror on yourself, right? Do I really understand this process before I automate it? And then if I don't, then there's probably a bit of pre-work to do it before we get to the good results of automation, right? But environmentally initiatives and processes are definitely on the forefront now that we're seeing kind of in Singapore. A friendly business environment. I don't know about friendly within automation. The only kind of example I can mention, we do have some customers calling their bots by names or their digital workers. You've got your Matildas, your Bobbies for scheduling. And I think the other one that kind of is a bit of a cheap plug. But yeah, look, the less mundane work you do, I think as an organization, the more friendlier you are towards other people.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect description of that. Good. Building upon, we now looked a little bit around the environmental part. The other part is obviously using these automation platforms, AI solutions for innovation, and ultimately to get a competitive advantage, because after all, it's still a business decision. So next question that I saw coming in on the chat, I would like therefore to move towards KT. I'm quite sure that you will get this question a lot. So what would be the ways in which an organization such as BAT uses AI-driven automation to foster innovation and obviously competitiveness at a global large behemoth that you are today?
Yeah, I think one of the many things that we really foresee is for us, automation started with standardization of the backends. Whether there is an automation or not, streamlining the backends of things helps us to keep our backyard a little bit cleaner, and so that we can put more effort to the front to do things. One of the many things that one of the example that I can really think of when it comes to AI and automation was how we actually move from a single category of products to a multi-category of products. And when we do a multi-category of products, there is also a new challenges that comes in. For example, how do we really engage new customer with it, and then how do we market the right pricing and stuff like that. And this is where the AI and automation works hand in hand. We see a lot of data existing everywhere, and then we invested a lot of money from getting data from the likes of Nelson and stuff like that. And all this needs to be analyzed, and it's also needs to throw in a little bit more of advanced analytics to a certain extent that helps us to do prediction of what is the potential growth that we will get with a certain price changes here and there. So these are some of the really noticeable benefits that we see when we combine the power of automation and AI together. One is just to gather all the data that we get, like thousands and thousands of, whether it's Excel, emails, website that we use, all this scrapping to do. And that's the other portion where the analytics comes in, then tells you this would be what predictive market share that will happen if you do a certain, changes here and there. So that's one of the many things that we've been exploring, and I really see this as a good advantage that is given to us to move ahead. And I don't believe that we are the only one that is doing it as well. I think a lot
topic or a right point, that you're trying to automate the mundane work, but also trying to leverage that in order to get more towards the insights, foresights that lead ultimately towards better decision making, because that's I think ultimately why organizations are so interested in this technology. Good, thanks for sharing that. Let me then kind of move towards that, or deepen a little bit in that with Andrew. And I see it also came in as a question by someone on the screen, and it says, if we build a little bit on what Katie just said around also looking at analytics, is there a role there for automation systems, and to what extent will we be able to leverage these kinds of decisions for predictive analytics?
Oh, tough question.
Let me build on very knowledgeable audience.
Let me build on KT's first, and then I'll get to the predictive analytics. Look, I think we got a tremendous opportunity in the global environment, but the challenge that we've all got is common. We've got a productivity crisis. And if you look across almost every country in Asia Pacific and Japan, our birth rates are declining. Our average age of the workforce is on the increase. And at the end of the day, to be competitive, all of us are going to have to be 1.5 times more productive to drive the same output. And I think that's where the great opportunity for AI and automation is. We're seeing some really, really interesting things across all industries. Banking, financial services, and insurance, I think, is probably the best example. They're always early adopters of technology. And it's interesting when you talk to those customers, they're already exploring avenues like Those companies that have auditors, they've got a concept called a modern auditor. Modern auditor is Gen AI enabled. And a case study that I read only just last week, I think it was done by BCG. They showed that by leveraging Gen AI, the modern auditor completed 12% more tasks, completed them 25% faster, and a 40% higher quality rate. Amazing results, right? They speak for themselves. Also in BFSI, we've got customers exploring what they can do with the financial advisors and wealth managers, how they can leverage Gen AI to do credit scores, credit checking, and do the first draft of a wealth advice report. And so there's a lot of interesting things happening industry by industry. When you get to predictive analytics, I think it's early. We've looked at a few opportunities in predictive analytics, particularly around mining, oil, resources kind of segment. And there's a lot of risk associated also in that segment. They're really big on health and safety. And I think predictive analytics for me is early. We've been involved with several discussions over the last year, but we haven't got any really good examples that I can share yet, but got loads of examples around Gen AI and even in the digitalization space, just that everyone going paperless and achieving significant advantages with document automation. We've seen that as a real explosive area across the market currently.
Yeah, and I think something you're saying is very interesting. You're saying not yet, because I'm quite sure it will be coming in the years to come. And the other thing that you're mentioning around the results that this is able to generate, and this is exactly why I love automation so much, because it's not just a technology that's going to help us do things a little bit better. It's miles and miles faster than anything we've seen. So I think we're all in a very, very exciting space. Good. I need to be mindful of the time because we have a very strict program, and somebody's already signing me that I need to start wrapping things up. So I'd like to end with one question for all of you, and I'm going to implore on you to keep it a little bit short. And my final question for all of you to think about is, what is going to be the coolest, nicest, or most interesting thing that automation and AI is going to solve in the next few years? Start with the way that we started. Mahmoud, what's your view?
Wow, keep it short. Okay. I think this is, I'm going to get a bit philosophical because this is the last answer, right?
Yes.
Andrew mentioned something about the declining birth rates and how we need to be more productive and kind of the way that automation kind of fills in that gap. I don't know if we're going to get there over the next few years, but I think we will reach a point where humans don't really need to do the mundane work, right? I know this is kind of a bit aspirational, but we will get there. And we will reach a point where organizations and government institutions have enough to support the universal base income, where you don't necessarily need to work. You can work if you want to, right? I don't think we're there. I don't think we're near there. It still requires a couple of years, maybe decades. But I do see us on that path to there. So I believe that would be a very cool thing if automation allows us, I guess, to express human potential. But yeah, I know, short answer, but big topic.
No, good. That's perfectly fine. KT, final thoughts.
The next few years, to be really honest, I just want to make sure that, I don't need to constantly change my automation when everybody decided to upgrade their system. But seriously, I think that the potential is, it's huge for us. I'm actually, everything I think is a ceiling, but AI keeps breaking in. So there's just loads and loads of capabilities and also wishes that you can come true. But honestly, automation, if you could combine with AI,
I think that's a very good ending phrase. The sky is the limit. Andrew, final thoughts are for you.
Yeah, I think that the future of work is exciting. I think we can solve our productivity crisis gee, it's going to be interesting to see the future of coding and bots building bots. Can't wait. So thanks for having me, Jan.
Absolutely. And with that, I would like to thank the panel for an amazing discussion. This is always one of my highlights in a conference, because it's going into the topics that I think are on almost everyone's mind today. So I would like to sincerely thank you for being a part of this panel, for sharing your wisdom and insights. It's always, for me, so easy if I have experts on the panel that I can throw a lot of difficult questions to, and I get the best of results. And I think if I look at all the engagement on the platform, I think the audience tends to agree with me. So thanks so much for taking the time. And I hope to see all of you again at upcoming editions of Automation Days Asia.
Thank you very much, Jan. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. And with that, before we move to the announcements of the next speakers and everyone who's waiting behind the scenes already, note that this is going to be the last segment where we are going to be handing out the quiz for winning the books, as well as the e-learning around service automation. So as many of you who have been with us from the start know, there's 5 questions, and if you answer them correct, you have a chance of winning these prizes. So the final question for today, and we will announce the winners at the closing ceremony later, is, in the context of automation, what is the primary role of an orchestrator? Is that A, B, C, or D? Let me start the poll right now. I'm going to give you 5 to 10 seconds to fill that in. Good. I think that this is too easy of a question, because I see almost everyone has it correct. Good. Another 5 seconds, and then I will close it. And there it is. So 86% had it correct. It's indeed managing and coordinating automated tasks and workflows. We will announce the winners for the books and the e-learning courses later during the closing ceremony at 5 o'clock. Good. Then we already have our next speakers lined up. So in 7 minutes from now, you once again need to make a very difficult choice, because we have 2 experts in their field. On track number 1, which is my track, we're going to be listening to Ian Uy Ang, who's the managing director at Ruma Solutions, and he is going to talk about automated property management systems. On the other track, which is hosted by John, we're having, for the first time, Victoria Araguani, who is a senior Power Platform developer, and she is going to talk about incorporating AI and automation, Power Automate as the catalyst for streamlined workflows. So again, I know it's a difficult choice you need to make, but we look forward to seeing you in 6 minutes from now. With that, I once again would like to thank the panel. So show them your love, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session, which will start very shortly. Thanks, everyone.